and thank you for joining me once again for Share Your Story. Today I have David with me from Tasmania in Australia. Thank you for joining me, David, and for volunteering your time today and to share a little bit about your story. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Rihanna. Absolute pleasure. Great to connect from sort of TikTok, and this is a subject that sort of I never really wasn't looking for it, but it kind of found me. So, look, where do I start? Probably my story is relatively short, I suppose, in the whole sort of awakening the process. Probably just under 2 years old.
Okay.
And it really sort of happened after my, second marriage failed and I moved out.
Yep.
And was sort of starting afresh. And then for some reason, one thing led to another. I started reading up about horoscopes and astrology. I'd always had a little play with it in the past. And then stumbled into tarot. And then from there were these messages about me having to do some things I never really thought I would be interested in doing, which was being vulnerable.
Interesting.
And because, I tell you what, if you'd asked me previously, was I fairly masculine? Yes. Can I butt heads? Yes. Do I own a set of tools? Yes. Side note, they are Ryobi for the weekend warriors.
Do you have an axe, though, to chop trees?
I have an axe and recently acquired a chainsaw as well. So, I mean, but I found it difficult to say to anyone that wasn't my wife or wife at the time or kids, I love you. It wasn't something, if I say it, I mean it. But to be able to say those words, couldn't say it to my mom, couldn't say it to my dad, sisters, anyone outside of it. And I always knew it was going to be one of those things that in the future, I'd have to look at it. There was a future David problem. Yeah. And so when I then, again, after the second marriage failed, it's like, Dave, you need to look into this. And I'm like, where the hell do I start? Like, where do I start? And then I came across Brene Brown.
Beautiful.
And I loved it. She sort of talked to the analytical side of me about, okay, when you shut yourself off in vulnerability, you're shutting off other gates at the same time. It's not an exclusive gate that you necessarily shut. And boy, was that triggering? Was that difficult? Because you don't want to have to worry about vulnerability, because for me, every time I saw vulnerability within my close family unit, so when it came to my mother and my sisters and all of that, emotions seemed like weakness. I'm not coping. This is happening. I can't deal with it. And I'm very emotional. So like, well, for me wanting to be the fixer, it's all like, well, I have no time for emotions.
Yeah.
And so to really dive and dig into that was just, it's something I'd never really completely dived into. So as I started diving into it, that's when, and this wasn't just by itself, I still kept on with the astrology, learning more about that.
Yep.
Getting into the tarot, and then it was from there, YouTube, wonderful thing. It then sort of suggests different videos. And then it's more about consciousness and awakening and soulmate and twin flames, and all of this stuff just started barraging in. And I was there going, oh, this is huge. So I started doing a lot of inner work about trying to understand my childhood, traumas and mum and father wounds, and who really am I, and all of that. And then, by God, as I'm doing that, the tears start flowing, the emotional releases. And then I'm there going, what the hell is going on? I'm doing all this work, I'm turning into a mess.
Feels like you're going backwards for a while, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And then, thinking or hearing about sort of then twin flames and Archangel Michael and all of that, I then stumbled across this terminology of divine masculine. I'm like, what the hell is this? I know what masculine is.
Yes.
chop wood, carry water, get things done, right?
That's right. Yes. The
And
everyday masculine, that is. Yes.
exactly.
Yep.
And so this intrigued me because I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And then really stepping into, well, what does that actually mean? And then I had a friend, shout out to Mandy, put me on to a book by David Dieter, which
Yes.
is
The superior man.
the way of the superior man.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him sort of went, it's a bit egocentric, isn't it? I'm going to become a divine masculine and tell everyone what to do. No, opened up the book, read it, and it was just absolutely incredible.
Mm.
And the first time I read it, I didn't quite get all of what he had to say. But some of the things that really sort of got to me was about sort of purpose and the way you can compose yourself and be present, but be vulnerable and playful,
Yes.
and bring it all in together. And I'm just like, wow.
It's a good book, and I definitely recommend it to every man who I've worked with in the past. And if some people are listening here, I definitely recommend it as well.
Oh, for sure. Because it just really it gave me a real appreciation. This was a big turning point of the divine feminine.
Yeah.
And so for me, if I had to sort of sum up the whole journey for me is becoming or aspiring to and working towards being a divine masculine is really the ability to truly celebrate and acknowledge the divine feminine, not just within yourself, but when you are searching for your partner. And that just kind of floored me because it's sort of like, divine masculine means build more muscles, carry heavier things, do all those kind of,
Yes, and that's the starting point, right? But that's not
yeah.
the deep stuff. So the divine masculine for you now, I understand what you're talking about but for anyone listening, sort of what does that mean to you, and what are you working on to build that within you?
Well, what is it? Most males are masculine, full stop.
Definitely.
So for me, the difference between what is masculine, growing hair on your face if you can and losing it at the top if you are,
Yes.
being a fixer, doing all these very stereotypical things is already present. Being a divine masculine is being really holding space. It's being able to be vulnerable, but coming from a healed vulnerability. Because you see a lot of, well, I've seen, thanks to the TikTok algorithm, this discussion happening about ladies or females wanting their partners to open up and be vulnerable. But when they get vulnerable, they open up and then they're a mess. And they go, no, put it back.
Yeah, and the women can't hold space for that.
And so when you're able to go through the wounds and really bust open limiting beliefs, and the big one's always, am I worthy enough?
Yep.
A lot of it stems back to that. To be able to sit in the mud, to be able to not have to just go and fix the problem, and be a container for feminine energy and understanding the polarities. So for me, the way I understand it is that the true essence of the divine feminine is chaotic love energy. It's creation. It is just turbulent and beautiful all at the same time.
Yeah.
And for a masculine is to be able to provide a container to contain that, to allow her to fully express in her power.
Beautiful.
And I've had chances where I've had situations where there's been a lot of that going on, and I likened it to being a bowl. Because when you're a bowl and you are containing something, the bowl actually doesn't judge what it's holding. It just holds it. And so being a divine masculine, in my point of view, is also being able to do that, not judging. Or when you're containing it, you're not containing it out of obligation or out of, absolute necessity. And there's that sort of sense of, oh, I have to do this because no one else is doing it. It's the ability to just hold it without
Definitely.
judgment.
And I think, like, while we're talking about this, I do want to note though that this is not a permission slip for, because I've spoke to some men about this type of thing, being able to hold space for women, the feminine,
Mm,
when they are a little more chaotic or more in their emotions and things like that.
mm,
But it's not a permission slip for women to be, I don't want to say crazy, but just toxic behavior where they're throwing
mm,
around unhealed emotion. So it is, women are more emotional and will always
mhm,
express more emotions, usually than a man who is in his masculine. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, what a lot of men have experienced, where the woman's coming at the man and is throwing her emotions, directly at the man and
mm.
saying, I don't know if I'm trying to get what I want to say across, but it's not a permission slip for someone to be toxic or
Yeah.
you know, whatever other words are there. But a man to be able to hold space for a woman to just be herself is truly powerful. And I don't know if this is what your experience is, but my belief is for a man to be able to do that, and I'm obviously not a man, but he has to be comfortable with his own emotions to
Mm,
be able to hold space for a woman to go to the depths of her emotions. Because if
mm.
he's not comfortable, how can he hold space for her if he doesn't even know what the emotions feel like within his own body? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And you raise a great point. There's been times where I've been in situations where you just fall into this sort of sense of holding space where there's quite an emotional thing going on,
Mm,
and you will feel the emotion that's going on. And
yep.
when you're able to feel that emotion, I found myself, feeling the emotion where there are tears coming
Yep.
down. And it's not a shame, it's not bad. It's just you are being present with them. You're not just a stone wall.
Mm,
It's that sort of nurturing container. But
yes.
you raise a valid point about just accepting sort of any type of behaviors because, you have a shield, hold this, and I'll just whack it. Um, that's
Which I think
that's
comes from a
yeah.
place of, one or two people not doing any healing work or not doing any introspective work. So I do believe if, as a man, you've done some healing work, some introspective work, you will attract a woman who's also done the same. So it should
Mm.
be, at the same sort of frequency or level together.
Look, absolutely. And, I've got friends who are doing the work at the moment with their partners who are completely not. And
Mm,
so you might find that there starts to be a
yes,
sort of a differing point of view.
it does.
Um, but I've got to say and I've got to say, really, this book, guys, girls, if you're watching it, this book, absolute game changer, because especially for the divine masculine, it just really comes down to purpose.
Mm,
And for me, that was really difficult because when I was reading that book, my biggest end game was to find my divine feminine and put everything above that. And
very
so,
common for men.
oh,
Very
and
common.
I
And then
just,
if the relationship breaks down, what have you got? You've got nothing. And
yeah.
that's where I think men are falling short at the moment.
But it's just so tempting, right? It's just so tempting because then you learn a few tricks and you want to show someone. Right? You
Of
you want to you
course,
you
of
want to
course. Yeah.
there's that need for intimacy, the need to be held, and
Yeah.
especially when you're going through this whole thing where it's like the death and rebirth. You're
Yes.
pulling your skin off and you rebirth, but you're doing it all by yourself, and
Yeah.
that's in my experience, it leaves a temptation open to make
Mm,
some pretty unhealthy decisions. Um, but I've got to say, when you come at this sort of sense of purpose, what is it that you're wanting to do? And at the core of it, it's going to be service. And is it going to be
mm,
service to one? Is it going to be service to many? It's going to be different for
yes.
for everyone. But when you
Yeah.
find that flow, you'll know the difference between karmic cycles and lessons and clues to be learned.
And
And
with your purpose as a man, I think when you find, the right feminine, the right woman, she will be on board with your purpose, and she'll probably have her own purpose as well in service
mm,
as well if she's done the work. So it's like you'll probably be, well, hopefully be heading in the same direction with that purpose, and perhaps even, I think when people are in service in this space, they often come together and offer, things together, which is even more potent and even more powerful than what someone can do individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love
Mm,
this sort of saying that when you've got two people like that come together, 1 + 1 doesn't equal two. It equals
mm,
much more than that.
does. Yeah.
And so you can be doing things independently, but there's generally a common theme of service. And so that's been for me so counterintuitive. To become more masculine, I had to fully embrace the feminine.
Mm.
And that was sort of like, hang on, so to turn right, I have to turn left.
Sounds counterintuitive, right? And I've tried to
Yeah.
talk about this a little bit on TikTok, and it's like you do have to embrace the duality. If you think about the yin yang sign,
Mm,
within each side of that yin yang sign, there's that little dot, and that little dot is, the duality. So to be the big bit masculine as a man, you still need that percentage of feminine, and it's going to be different for every man
mm.
to truly embrace your truest nature, which for most men is masculinity. And you need to have that. I've spoke to many men about it. It's like you need to have that. If you don't, you come across as cold or
Mm.
robotic or that type of man, and that's where women start to run, I guess.
Yeah,
Turn
well,
away.
my go-to previous to all of this was logic.
Mhm.
So in a world where emotion, especially from a very young age, I sort of shut it down. It was logic. So as long as I could eloquently enough propose what I wanted to happen,
Mm.
and my partner or whoever in front of me sort of wanting to sort something out or exchange ideas or to get an opinion across, or even just try and get a emotion or a point across, if they couldn't do it as well as me, then I simply wouldn't listen to them. And I would win the argument but lose their heart. And I
Mhm.
didn't really realize that until later on. Because if you haven't got that emotion, if you can't think in colors as opposed to numbers, then the only common ground is logic. And that then comes down to talent.
Yep.
If you can be a good speaker, great. If you're not a good speaker, well, okay.
Yeah.
And it leaves people very frustrated. Like they've lost the argument, but no one's won.
No.
And so being able to feel into that and to explore that is so powerful, because at the end of the day, words are just there to interpret energy.
Mm,
And
definitely.
so the polarities are very important. So, but yes, diving into the opposite direction has been a massive one for
So
me.
important.
So
So, David, I guess because coming from the space where it seems like, and again, I'm only talking from what I see on social media, from my own posts, from other people's posts, but it seems like this is a space where a lot of men are about to, or maybe are diving into at the moment. But if a man
mm,
is at his starting point of his journey of diving into vulnerability and learning to explore about emotions more as a man, how did you start the process? Because this is something that a lot of men are like, well, I don't know what to do, where do I start? And I heard you say that, where do I
mm.
start? So other than the book of David Dieter, where did you start?
Yeah, well, I mean, the book in my journey came in further
Later.
on. So
Okay.
that was the start of understanding the
The
divine
masculine.
masculine. But
Okay.
where I started was trying to understand because again, when you don't think of things from, or for me, for an emotional standpoint, it's a value proposition.
Mm.
Everything's logic.
Yeah.
It's one, two, three, A, B, C, big, small. And so it was like, okay, well, what am I missing out on by shutting this door to vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What is my perception of vulnerability? What is my perception of emotions?
Mm.
And then from there was that sort of Brene Brown, which is sort of like vulnerability and creativity are very much hand in hand. You
Mm-hmm.
shut one down, they both go down. So for me, being a creative and having a bit of a block, that was sort of a bit of motivation.
Okay. Made sense. Yep.
And so it's sort of there has to be a starting point. So you got to get
Mm.
out of that sort of the dogma mindset that there's
Yes.
only one way. But to get out of that, you need to have something that talks to you in that language. It says, actually, you're missing out on that
Mm.
to get you started. That's the
Yeah.
first
Okay.
domino to fall. So for any guy out there who's starting the journey, It's, well, you've already started.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that brought you onto the journey? And then think about what the blocks might have been. And if you're coming from a logical standpoint, look for the logical reasons why you need to be vulnerable, and
Mm-hmm.
look into the reasons why you feel as though emotions are bad.
Yeah,
And
definitely. So
then,
start to explore your beliefs around it.
absolutely. And
Mm.
then from there, it's like just grabbing that little piece of
Yeah,
fabric and
I'm
then it
pulling
starts
it.
unraveling. And you'll generally end up uncovering stuff
Lots.
from the past, traumas,
100%. And look,
um,
most of it, which, most of it you probably be aware, is it links back to childhood, and it links back to
mm,
everything that you've experienced like your whole life. I often talk about it. It's like when you start to do this type of healing work, it's like there's almost like there's a dot to dot over every
mm,
moment in your life, and it stems all the way back to childhood. You are like this because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. And until you become aware of that and start to say, well, no, I no longer want to be like that, I want to change, it's just going to continue like a snowball
mm,
effect, and you just sort of live your life in automatic pilot. Whereas when you say, enough's enough, I'm missing out on this by not being vulnerable, or whatever it is that someone's working on,
mm,
it's like, I'm going to change this. And I think you might have mentioned, it can be deeply uncomfortable when you begin to face yourself and you say, I've been like that, I did that, I've done it for myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I was that person before, and I'm not
mm.
proud of that, but it was a part of my journey, and here I am now because I've done some of the work and broke some of those chains and wanted to create change. But you do have to be honest with yourself and say, this is where I'm at, and if it's a starting point,
Mm.
then that's okay. Just keep going, I think.
100%, because the change is difficult, and you see people who want all the change with no change. If I could just, change it, I just don't want to feel sad or
Yes.
alone or whatever it is anymore. But one of the funny things that kept me, and I didn't realize this until much further on, was going back to my childhood. I never really felt safe. And it's not because I had bad parents, it's not because
Mm-hmm.
of anything.
Yep.
And so when I truly asked myself the question, when was the last time I felt safe? And I'm there going, well, oh, like that truly peaceful,
Mm.
safe. And my coping mechanism around not feeling safe was just to be constantly moving,
Okay.
constantly going.
Yeah.
Add a Susan of ADHD into all of that, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's
Yep.
a lovely delight.
Honestly, I think a lot of people use that coping mechanism. So
Yeah, and so to be vulnerable, you can't be fast.
no.
You can't be in your head. You can't be all of these things sort of distracting.
Mm.
Vulnerability is really in the moment. You've got to slow it down. You've
Mm.
got to
Drop down
start
into
to
the heart.
absolutely.
100%.
So it feels sort of counterintuitive. So
Mm.
I've got to say, to come back to the earlier question, how, in my experience, the two major things, and I can only look at this in retrospect. It's not like I sort of sat down and planned it out,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
sort of how it happened, because everyone's got their own journey, is figuring out, what's the benefits of being vulnerable, being open to it, and then working on myself to get to a point where I could slow down to be that, work through all the stuff that bubbles out when you're in that vulnerable state,
Mm.
to then, once you clear a lot of it out, it doesn't mean you've got rid of everything, but you're there enough to be there for others
Yeah, definitely.
and feel it within yourself. So it's a mega journey, and I think
Definitely. But
I'll
I
be
think
honest.
that note of feeling safe is really important because, when you look at just the traits of masculinity, there's that safety. So the masculine provides
Mm,
safety for the feminine, whether it's in yourself or with someone else. And I think I might have said it before in a different context, but if you don't feel safe in your own body, again, you can't create safety for anyone else, that you bring into your
mm,
life, whether it be your children, whether it be your partner or someone else. Like, you
mm,
can't create a feeling of safety unless you feel safe in yourself. So, you said you didn't have a particularly bad childhood, and I didn't either. But I know that I didn't feel safe in my body either when I started to do the work. And there was many things for me to have to explore, and it was things, feeling safe to speak up, or feeling safe to be seen, feeling
Mm,
safe to put myself out there. All of these things then led to me going down the path of, okay, it's safe to be vulnerable now because I feel safe enough to do all these other things and put myself out there. So, from a woman's perspective, many women I've worked with, it's very similar. They don't feel safe in themselves. They haven't built their own inner masculine to provide that safety, so they
mm,
can't be vulnerable. And I think there's this perception that, well, I'm not sure what you think, but perception that women are vulnerable. But women are only vulnerable, I think, to a certain extent at this point in time because they're able to be more emotional. But are
mm.
we? Are we allowing ourselves to be truly vulnerable and to be truly seen in a relationship? And I don't think many women are at this point in time either. So
Yeah.
it's something that, men and women need to work on, is this ability to be vulnerable, to be truly seen, and to show your soul, if you like,
Mm.
to this other
Well,
person.
for me, there's a big difference between being emotional and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So being emotional is, you know, expressing your feelings
Mm,
really hard, whatever they are. Being vulnerable is actually sitting down and talking to the person why you feel that way.
yes.
And so a lot of the time I see in and blanket just people is I feel really crap. I'm really upset. I'm really depressed. I'm really, okay, why is that? Oh, because of this and this and this. And it'll always be better once I win the lottery and this happens and interest rates go down and there's a new prime minister and all these type of things. It's always out
External
there.
stuff, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not wrong. All of those things would make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
But being vulnerable is sort of like, well, actually, I'm I'm feeling this way because I really don't like my job. I'm in a relationship that I don't know why, but I don't want to be in it, but I can't leave it.
Yeah.
Or I'm in a job that this is a situation, and they sort of then allow themselves to just still be in that situation,
Yeah.
but they don't want to say it because it sounds silly.
Yeah.
And nothing sounds silly because everyone's probably dealing with it, but there's a societal norm that is very masculine, which is go get it, do it, say it, be it, whatever it is. The old Tony Robbins back from the 80s and 90s, that sort of, sort of power moves and all of that. But
How's your
we all
day? Good. How are you today? Good. I'm
good,
good.
busy. I'm busy,
Busy. But
busy,
imagine if
busy,
we actually
good,
started
busy.
like, well, sometimes I actually say how I'm feeling to people, and I can see they're just like, oh,
Oh,
they don't know what to say
I
when I
don't know.
actually say the truth.
Yeah, how are you? I feel like crap, but I sat watching TV all day, feeling guilty about the stuff that I needed to do, and pounded 4 liters of ice cream.
Start saying the truth. It's really funny when you see people's reaction to it.
Yeah.
I like to test it sometimes.
Well, I've said, well, my cousin taught me this, that there's two words that you need to get through any conversation. If it's light surface stuff, it's right and yeah. And all you need to do is change the inflections, right?
Well, I don't know about you, but once you start to do this sort of digging into your own inner world, like I can't really have surface level conversations too well anymore. And I literally, I don't, I must come across as rude, but I switch down and switch off, and I can't do it. I literally can't do it. So yeah, it's
I,
hard.
it's one of those things I've never, unless you really have to, like for work purposes. And now, because I do my own things, I don't have to worry about that. But when you do get into these conversations, the best way to sort of get out of those situations, just find a nice way to shut it down. Like you'll
I'm
get
pretty good
there.
at it.
You'll get there. Oh, I know I need to, and you'll get there. Bye bye.
See you later.
But it is difficult. But at the core of all of that, there's actually someone wanting to tell you something, but they're afraid
But
to
they
tell you
can't.
that
Yeah.
for the shame of what that judgment might be that they're actually putting onto you
Mm,
from their own projection. And
definitely.
but we've all been especially in these generations, we've all been raised that way. And our parents were raised by their parents and their parents were raised by their parents. Just so happens we're going through this massive shift in awareness where everyone's have to pull the handbrake on and do a 180 on what is really important in life, as opposed to go to school, go to university, buy a house, get married, have kids.
Everything's
and
changing.
Then sort of like the age-old question, what's the purpose of life?
Well, I think the baby boomer type thing, that's the end of it. Like we are different. And you know, I'm in my 40s. I was brought up by baby boomers and was brought to believe all of those things. And it's like, well, I don't want that. And I've had to break all of those chains and push against, you know, what was sort of ingrained in me to say, hey, and I don't want that, and it's not working for me. So, you know, it's we are all being now invited, I guess, to question what it is that we actually want and what feels good for us in life, and to push back against, you know, the societal norms of what it means to be successful or what it means to be, you know, whatever. And for me, it's you know, I'm enjoying a slow life now, and I love it. So I'm sure that will change at some point when I want to ramp things up again. But, you know, for now, it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
I think my mum still sometimes slips in, when are you going to get a job?
Well, while the house pays for itself, I don't see a need for it.
Still good. I'm like, I do actually work, you know, that I just don't go work for someone else.
Exactly. And I've got 50% custody of my two kids. And so when they're with me, I take them to school, I pick them up, I do all these things. And they then go back to their mums, and they keep on saying to their mum, why can't you be more like dad? Because, you know, they say they whinge about having to go to after school care and those type of things.
She's working a normal type job.
That's right. And I have to tell my kids, I'm the exception. This is not normal. But again, when you start to really, don't get me started on the abundance piece, right? That could be a whole nother topic. But to really feel it and to watch it sort of come in and what abundance means, because it's very easy to be abundant with 10 million in the bank.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I don't know, but yeah, I'm assuming it would be.
Yeah. I'm not coming from experience, by the way, but I'm assuming it'd be very easy. But to know that everything's covered when it needs and you've always got enough money to do what you need at the time, you know, it always, when you project forward a couple of months and you sort of go, do I have enough for that?
I've done a lot of work around this, moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundant mindset, and it takes time. But it's
so
good.
much to work through. So much to work through. Like you got to tell the bottom of your stomach, it's okay, we're abundant, and then your head goes, really? And your stomach's like,
or when people say, yeah, but you can be abundant in many other ways, not just financially. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't pay the bills though, does it? So
yeah, I'm abundantly in a tent. Yeah, no, it's not. That's where my creative juices are really going to flow. So
no, I get it. There's always something to work on. I get it.
Absolutely. And until we take our last breath, that's the way I see it. It's that constant evolution.
Well, I love that, you know, you're sharing your story and sharing, you know, how you've begun. And I know it's not finished, but how you've begun your journey. And, you know, you said you're 2 years in, I'm maybe 3, so I'm not that much in front of you, if at all. But
amazing
it
job.
Just keeps going through. Yeah, 3 or 4 now, but it just keeps going. It just changes, and things do feel better. I you know, from my experience, things feel good once you've worked through the layers of shit. I call it debris, layers of debris that, you know, debris you've built up over your life and lifetimes, depending on what you believe. But before we finish up, David, is there anything else that you would like to share or to offer, you know, to anyone that's listening, I guess?
Yeah, I think just following on from what you said just then, where I am now, I'm very happy with it. But I haven't got everything I've asked for. Far from it. But I've got everything I didn't ask for, which I didn't know I needed. And I love the position that I'm in. But I can say that now, But when I was going through all of that sort of stuff, that shit that you talked about, horrendous.
Yes.
Like, and it's almost to the point of it feeling cruel. And then when you just sort of go for the next bit to the next bit to the next bit, it really kind of feels like, am I going crazy? Is something actually working against me here? Why do I have to feel all of this? So my biggest parting thing is keep going. You know, if you feel as though there's something still drawing you in this direction, it's not forever. It's a healing process. And I don't think any of us are going to be finished until we close our eyes for the last time.
No,
But
definitely.
allow yourself to sort of go, look, there are going to be shit days. You're going to feel like a train wreck. You're going to have times where it just feels too much, or why me? I mean, these things do creep in. And so for me, when I was in a trajectory going up, like I always like to succeed at what I do. And normally what I'd used to do is only do things I knew I was good at. It's
Yes,
not
done that too.
not necessarily the best growth mindset I've ever come across, but you know. And so when I was going up, I was really happy with myself. But when I was going down, I thought I was a failure. And then realizing that growth
goes up and down.
But can still head in the right direction. So sticking at it and knowing that there will be a time in the future, your future self will look back at you and give you a high five.
Definitely. And I definitely have to agree. And, you know, what I will say around that is that, well, for me as a woman, I sought help. So I did my own training to become obviously a coach and hypnotherapist and help people do it now, but I sought help and I still seek help if I need it. So I see different practitioners at different times for different things. And I've spoke to men who have sought help through therapists and NLP practitioners and all the rest of it. So there's plenty of people out there these days that if you are in that state, you know, and I've been there and I know it's messy and it's horrible and it doesn't feel good. Sometimes you just need someone to talk to. And sometimes, you know, often if you have, you're in a relationship or even your family, most people don't understand what you're going through. So, I recommend seeking someone that a professional person that can help you if you need it. You don't always need it, but sometimes you do. Because, you know, I have a lot of clients that say, well, I've tried to talk to my partner or I've tried to talk to my family and they just don't understand. And it can feel like it's worse than if you feel like no one understands you. So I just wanted to say that because it is, I know how uncomfortable it is. And, I've been on the floor, in the fetal position on days and it's like, is this ever going to end? And sometimes you just need someone to say, it is. It's going to end. Keep going.
Yeah, 100%.
So, well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you in all your wisdom. I will hit stop on the record button in a moment, but thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. Great to be here.